Hello, and welcome to another episode of Cutter One. I am your host, Jay, just Jay, your resident maker of trouble, your resident culture warrior. I hope you are all doing well. Well, you knew it was bound to happen. You knew that sooner or later, in this era of post mortem on season one of Rings of Power, you knew that eventually you were going to start to see the articles that try to shift focus. Okay. And we've seen it with other franchises, and there's always this moment where they go through and they try to say that any fans who criticized whatever the particular IP was, you were in the wrong, even though the crux of your argument is that you wanted the either series makers, showrunners, writers, or filmmakers to hold true to the lore and the canon of the franchise. But that they shouldn't have to, and for you to expect them to as a fan is somehow wrong on and toxic. So you knew this was coming. I knew this was coming. And this is how they lay the groundwork. Trust me, you're going to see the articles like this from Rings of Power now, coming out now, and then 2 years from now when season 2 shows up, and people start to level criticisms at them again, you're going to see people point back to these articles and be like, well, we were telling you 2 years ago that, the problem is the canon. But anyway, let's get into it. This one's coming to us from Esquire magazine, and it is by Adriana Westenfeld. Okay. And it says, the problem with canon. Rings of Power and Star Trek Strange New Worlds did the impossible, adapting behemoth pieces of IP without pissing off fans for the most part. Okay, right out of the gate, wrong. We're not 3 sentences into this thing, and you're already wrong. Turns out Star Wars and the MCU have much to learn. Uh-oh. So this ought to be interesting. Let's see. It's the best of times and the worst of times to be a fan. For devotees of mega franchises like Star Wars and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there's never been a more massive glut of new content. We're living through a golden age of interconnected storytelling as sequels and prequels explode across film, television, and literature faster than many of us can keep up. Yes, that's because the mainstream media is creatively bankrupt at this point. So they're scooping out existing franchises to try and make a buck off of existing fan bases. But I digress. Yet, at the same time, these mega franchises are tormented by their most strident fans. That's you guys, by the way. Melting down into paroxysms of toxicity through petitions, review bombing, and targeted harassment campaigns, among other odious tactics. Toxic fandom is a complex beast, but at the root of its many convulsions, there's often one sore spot: the sticky concept of canon. Dun, dun, dun. Canon is scripture. Canon is king. Canon can do no wrong. Its definition is simple. The term refers to a fictional body of work and its established facts. But that's where the simplicity ends. In this age of massive cultural production, of sequels and prequels and cinematic universes, where does canon start and stop? Do novelizations, video games, or other ancillaries count? And who gets to decide? When new entries to the canon subvert or retcon the established universe, what's to be done with those unruly fictions? After all, when storytellers dare to expand canon, whether by disrupting the narrative or simply shining a flashlight into its underexplored corners, there can be hell to pay. Increasingly, fans have become canon's militant enforcers. When those seeking to enlarge canon stray across its perceived guardrails, like J.J. Abrams or Rian Johnson, backlash is swift and vociferous. In one memorable dust-up, Star Wars fans petitioned for Disney to erase The Last Jedi from the franchise's canon altogether. Somehow, canon is at once a collective orthodoxy and a personal totem, inflected with each viewer's own biases and desires, even their own bigotry, too. That's you. This is, folks, honestly, and I know a lot of times we sort of take a lighthearted approach to respond to this, but this is how they see you. You, the paying customer, you who finances these things with your hard-earned money, who busts your ass every day at your job to make money so that you can spend it on these things that you enjoy. This is how they view you. You are, to them, you are a fucking problem. Okay, and this article sort of is letting you know that. Canon has a big problem, and the call is coming from inside the house. It's not hard to see how this obsession with canonical fealty has hamstrung Marvel and Lucasfilm, two franchise juggernauts whose every innovation is punished by a fan meltdown. When storytellers are held hostage by their own audiences, it undermines their ability to do what artists do best: explore, revise, and play. Bullshit. What artists are supposed to be doing is entertaining you. Okay? You can explore on your own time. You can revise your own story, and you can play around with whatever you want if you've created it. But when you take somebody else's work and you start to change it to suit your needs and your wants, and then you expect the paying fans to just suck it up and deal with it, I'm calling bullshit on that one. I'm sorry. That's not what artists are supposed to do. This is the problem with storytelling in the age of the mega franchise. All too often, the impulses of abiding canon conflict with the impulses of making art. As Ron Moore, a longtime Star Trek writer who later rebooted Battlestar Galactica, put it, quote, "It's frustrating to be in the writer's room and tossing out stories, then having to stop yourself and go, does this work? Does this violate continuity?" And having to call people and check encyclopedias and look up information. You want to have it all in your head and just play and just play. The Trek universe has got to the point where you can't play anymore. Okay, now let's think about what they're saying. What he's saying is the Star Trek universe has gotten to the point where they just can't change shit on their own. Okay, where there's, certain things, that they have to abide by. Like, I don't know, let's say that Kirk is a man. Okay, if they feel like somehow it's inhibiting their creative and artistic abilities to be limited to the fact that canonically Kirk is a man, or pick anything you want. That's what they're saying, that you can't play anymore. You can't make shit up anymore. How can storytellers possibly play or progress under the weight of all that baggage and still please today's demanding audiences too? Some mega franchises have found a solution where canon isn't a restriction, but rather a foundation. If fans won't accept stories where canon makes less sense, then by God, these shows will bring the canon to make more sense. Consider Strange New Worlds, Paramount Plus's sensational Star Trek prequel set during the captaincy of Christopher Pike, who preceded Captain Kirk aboard the Enterprise. Fans of the original series no doubt remember the landmark two-part episode, The Menagerie, which shocked viewers when Spock abducted his former commander, Captain Pike, and stole the Enterprise, risking his life and career to transport a paralyzed Pike to a forbidden planet. Excellent episodes, by the way. It's a fantastic episode, but it lacks a backstory. Just what sort of bond existed between these two men that drove rule-following Spock to steal Starfleet's flagship? Enter Strange New Worlds, a prequel whose major thematic concerns include Pike's anxiety after foreseeing his own grim fate, as well as his deep and meaningful friendship with Spock. In the season 1 finale, after Spock intuits that Pike has saved his life through some alternate universe Hui, Spock says, quote, "I believe I may owe you a debt of gratitude," unquote. The scene continues with a poignant conversation about how much these two men mean to one another. But for devoted fans, it runs a level deeper. So this is why Spock steals the Enterprise, because he owes Pike his life, and he'd do anything to save a beloved friend. Suddenly, everything that lies ahead in the canonical timeline makes that much more sense. Strange New Worlds has mastered a brand of storytelling that informs and enlarges the canon without dishonoring or disrupting it, pleasing finicky fans and context-less newbies alike. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's something that all of us fans, be it Star Trek, Star Wars, Marvel, Tolkien, this is what we want. Like, if you want to come in and create new things, you can do it in a way where it doesn't destroy the lore, it doesn't destroy the canon, it doesn't screw up the timeline or the universe, and you can still be creative and tell your new story as long as you make sure it fits in with the existing material. But apparently, us fans asking for that, we're the bad guys, as she previously said. As Strange New Worlds writer Davy Perez explained to Inverse, quote, "Our goal is never to undo people's experiences with the original series, but if we can manage it, perhaps to give us an interesting perspective to consider that lines up with the original stories. That's what's fun about playing in this era of Star Trek canon. There are a lot of stories and ideas that have been touched on in the past, but still have lots of potential to explore." Unquote. There are those words again: fun, play, explore. Call this the yes and approach to canon. By building on what's already known, storytellers can make existing fictions bigger, richer, and clearer. Over on Prime Video, here we go. Over on Prime Video, Rings of Power follows a similar model. Bullshit. Flat out, you're wrong. Where J.R.R. Tolkien's source material is narratively thin. Okay, stop right there. She literally just had the audacity to say J.R.R. Tolkien's source material is narratively thin. Even if she's saying, where it's narratively thin. I've never heard narratively thin used in connection with J.R.R. Tolkien ever. So thank you, journalist. You're an idiot. Consisting largely of... So where J.R.R. Tolkien's source material is narratively thin, consisting largely of battles and successions, Rings of Power's showrunners have grafted connective tissue onto this sparse scaffolding, shading in the thoughts, feelings, and choices that propel familiar characters to each predetermined plot point. Holy shit. Wow. I'm fucking amazed. So not only are you shitting on Tolkien's work, okay, saying it's narratively thin and consists largely of just battles and successions, okay, probably the single most beloved fantasy fiction of the 20th century, okay, that has inspired more offshoots. And without Tolkien's work in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, we don't have Dungeons and Dragons. We don't have all this fantasy genres. We don't have Elder Scrolls. We don't have all these things today. We don't have without Tolkien's work. And here, this author or this journalist is saying that his material is narratively thin and just consists of battles and successions. And it's the showrunners, the Rings of Power showrunners, that are giving it connective tissue, and shading in thoughts and feelings and choices that propel familiar characters to reach predetermined plot points. Wow, holy fucking shit. We know where these characters are going, but if there's one thing Tolkienites understand, it's that it's the journey that shapes and changes us, not the destination. Where Tolkien gave us only the destination, Rings of Power backfills the journey. Take Lord Elrond, for example. How did he become such a legendary statesman, able to build consensus between mortal and immortal races? Rings of Power imagines his years as a rookie diplomat, building out a formative and often touching friendship with the dwarven prince Durin IV, as Strange New Worlds accomplishes with Spock. Suddenly, Elrond's canonical future makes more sense. To be clear, the Star Trek and Lord of the Rings fandoms are not without their own share of bad behavior. And for some fans, even simply enlarging the canon is still a bridge too far. But Gandalf wasn't in Middle-earth during the Second Age, these persnickety purists argue. taking aim at the all too likely theory that Rings of Power's mysterious stranger is, in fact, the notorious wizard Gandalf. Sure, Gandalf the Grey had yet to arrive in Middle Earth during the Second Age setting encompassed by Rings of Power, but during this timeline, he was knocking around the continent by other names in other forms. No, he wasn't. And even if you try to play fast and loose with, how we talked about in a previous video where we mentioned how they do make a slight reference that um, he was sort of in the unseen realm um, as a spirit, or took on the guise of an average elf and interacted with them. He wasn't just tooling around the countryside in the second era. But I digress. He was tooling around the continent by other names and other forms. Where canon obsessed fans might see a limitation, any good storyteller would see a tantalizing mystery. Tolkien himself often amended and expanded his own work. So why shouldn't Rings of Power take some creative liberties, especially with the author's gray areas? Isn't it more fun to think about what could be true rather than what must be true? No, no, and no. All right, let me keep going here. When we love stories, we want them to make sense, to have consistent internal logic, to meet the sky-high expectations that our devotion has placed upon them. But canon isn't purely good by definition, and sometimes it restricts good storytelling. For a story to endure and expand decade after decade, as all of these mega franchises have, it must be adaptive and reactive. That's the very soul of adaptation. As Tolkien himself said of his own legendarium, it must leave room for, quote, other minds and hands, unquote. And I hate when they fucking use that quote because they take it so out of context. Isn't it exciting to consider that we still don't know everything about these characters and their worlds all this time later? These fictional sandboxes are endlessly generative. It's part of why we can't get enough of them. In the age of corporatized canon, perhaps wanting these storytellers to tear up the rule book is too much to ask. But as radical as this yes and approach to canon may seem, it's really just a shade of what's possible. Ron Moore offers a compelling roadmap for what it might look like to no longer be straitjacketed by canon. Quote, "This was version 1 of Trek. Love it, celebrate it, watch it forever if that is your cup of tea. Go ahead. Let's have version 2. Let's have another Starship Enterprise with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. And let's tell a different version of the events. Look at Shakespeare. How many versions of Cleopatra can the world stand? As many as you can think of. Let's just do a different take on it and get energy out of it and not worry about all the backstories. You want Trek to be fun, so make it fun. When it comes to canon, it's true what they say. If you love something, set it free." Oh, there's so much here. So much here. Wow. Okay, so Adriana, basically what this whole article was about is this concept that you see now in a lot of the writers' rooms in Hollywood, and you see this a lot now, and it's because there is a fundamental lack of creative ability in Hollywood right now. I mean, look at the original shows that you're seeing on whether it's Netflix or HBO Max or Paramount Plus or Disney Plus or whatever. Look at the original shows where they're not constrained by any sort of canon. It's a completely original show, and they're still crappy. They still are bad ideas, and they're executed badly. So it's bad concepts executed badly. Look at She-Hulk. Okay, bad concept executed badly. Okay. The idea that you would do an entire season of a show just to troll fans is a bad concept. But then in doing that, you created lousy stories for each and every episode, and the CG was crap, the acting was crap, the stories were crap. So you had a bad concept followed by bad execution. That's what we're getting out of writers' rooms and out of Hollywood today. And what this article tries to do is to say that somehow when these writers take on these big tentpole projects, be it Star Trek, Marvel Universe, Lord of the Rings, or Tolkien, I should say, and there's plenty others, Doctor Who and all that stuff. But that when these guys take on those projects, it's not their own ineptitude and lack of ability that's causing the problem. It's the fact that they're confined by canon, by lore, by you know something that was done right the first time, and hence it exists for decades and is still beloved. Okay, Lord of the Rings is translated into, I think it's over 60 languages around the world. Okay, um, it's loved by anybody who sits down and reads it falls in love with some aspect of it, and it was done right. Okay, and you now have this era where people fail upward. So you have writers with little to no experience. They'll be attached to some shit show, okay, that will get canceled after one season. But then these writers get bumped up to be given an even grander project to work on, even more important, bigger budgeted project to work on. So Hollywood's the only industry I know of where you can fail upward like that. Okay. Any other industry, if you are given millions of dollars to complete a project and are expected to get return on your investment and it fails, you get fired. You don't get a better job offer out of it. Hollywood's the only industry that will do that, where you can write a crappy, shitty show, and then somebody else will be like, "Hey, we've got an even bigger show we want you to ruin." But anyway, I digress. There's a lack of creativity coming out of Hollywood, and this article is sort of laying the groundwork. Again, these are the articles that are going to be pointed to a year and a half from now, 2 years from now, when season two of Rings of Power comes out, and people are complaining about things they're seeing in the trailers that are wrong, and how the lore is being pillaged, and they're going to point back to these articles and be like, no, 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 we're trying this whole new approach. And as you could see, the author of this article, total disregard for the original works, feels that they are there to be quote unquote played with and explored and changed on a whim. Okay, no regard, no respect for the originality of the works that these writers are being honored. I personally, if somebody came to me and said, "Hey, we want you to write a TV show, a series based on Tolkien's work," I think I would probably I'd probably shit myself, because I'd be so nervous, because I would want to honor the work so much that I would be afraid that no matter what I did, I'd come up short. Clearly, that's not the mindset that these people have, and this journalist is just laying it out bare for everyone to see. She basically says that the fans are just horrible. Okay, that if the fans want you to stick to the lore, that's them being toxic. Now, let that sink in. You're a Star Trek fan. For you guys out there that are, MCU fans, or Star Wars fans, or Doctor Who fans, or Tolkien fans, okay, and you want them to honor and respect the work, and tell new stories, but within the framework of that franchise, the existing lore of that franchise, you're the problem, according to this author. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. I would definitely. I think there's a lot of room for discussion here. Um, but this is the type of stuff that pisses me off. This is the type of stuff I knew, and we're gonna see more of it. I guarantee you, we're gonna see more of it. But yeah, Hollywood is creatively bankrupt. Okay, as somebody who I write stories. I'm helping my wife write a book right now. Um, Yeah, Hollywood is creatively bankrupt, and they can try and spin it 9 ways to Sunday all they fucking want, and it won't change the fact that they are just creatively bankrupt, and they should not have access to these franchises like Star Wars and Star Trek and Tolkien's works, and these things should never have been given to them because these people do not know what to do with them. They just see it as okay, it's got a built-in fan base that we can use to get some money out of it. But we don't have to respect the original creator's vision. We don't have to respect the ideas and themes and concepts of the original story. We can just use it as a to use her words as a scaffold to build whatever the fuck we want. And I just think that that's heartbreaking. It's disgusting, and yeah, I as a fan, I just can't stand it. But if anything, it's crap like this that inspired me to do this. Crap like this. It's crap like this that inspired crap like this. So if you like what I'm doing here, give the video a like, give the video a share, leave a comment below. I'm definitely interested. I want you guys, I want to hear what you guys have to say because, like I said, this comes right out and says, lore, canon, we don't care. And I want to hear what fans think about it. I mean, and a lot of us are fans of multiple different franchises. Like I'm huge into Tolkien and Elder Scrolls and Dungeons and Dragons and Dragonlance, but I'm also a huge Star Wars fan. I'm also a huge Star Trek fan. I've got my Reliant and Enterprise from the Wrath of Khan plastic model kits sitting here off to the side here. So I'm a fan of multiple different franchises, and it's horrible what they're doing. They're just going through and destroying each and every one. I saw Gary from Nerdrotic was doing a live stream, and he posted a picture, and it's Grim Reaper knocking on doors, and you see that the doors behind him were like Doctor Who, and then the next door, and it was already opened, and then the next door was Star Trek, and it was already open, and then the next door was Star Wars, and it was already opened, and then the Grim Reaper was knocking on the door that said Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. So that one always stuck with me. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment down below, give the video a like, and more importantly, if you would be so kind, give the video a subscribe, or give the channel a subscribe. Trying to build this thing and getting it going and getting it bigger. I can't even talk, I'm so anyway. I will see you guys on the next one. I gotta calm down, just breathe. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.